Wall Street is an iconic symbol of the global financial industry. It is the home of the world's largest stock exchange, the New York Stock Exchange, NYSE, and is the birthplace of some of the most successful financial institutions in history. However, Wall Street has also been the site of some of the most significant financial crises in history, including the 2008 global financial crisis. One such crisis, known as the paperwork crisis, occurred in the 1970s and had a significant impact on the financial industry. This crisis was caused by a combination of factors, including rapid growth in the volume of securities transactions, an increase in the number of intermediaries involved in these transactions, and a lack of coordination and standardization in the processing of paperwork. This article will explore the causes and consequences of the paperwork crisis, as well as the lessons learned and changes made to prevent a recurrence of this crisis. Causes of the paperwork crisis. The paperwork crisis was caused by a combination of factors, including the rapid growth in the volume of securities transactions, an increase in the number of intermediaries involved in these transactions, and a lack of coordination and standardization in the processing of paperwork. During the 1960s and 1970s, the volume of securities transactions on Wall Street grew rapidly. This growth was driven by a number of factors, including the introduction of new financial products, such as mutual funds and options, and an increase in the number of investors participating in the market. As the volume of transactions grew, so did the amount of paperwork required to process these transactions. At the same time, the number of intermediaries involved in these transactions also increased. For example, a single stock trade might involve a broker-dealer, a clearinghouse, a custodian, and a transfer agent. Each of these intermediaries had its own set of paperwork and processes, leading to a lack of coordination and standardization in the processing of paperwork. Consequences of the paperwork crisis. The paperwork crisis had significant consequences for the financial industry. One of the most significant consequences was the risk of errors and delays in the processing of paperwork. This could lead to a number of problems, including the failure to settle trades on time, which could result in losses for investors and intermediaries. In addition, the paperwork crisis also led to increased costs for firms. Firms had to hire additional staff to manage the paperwork associated with securities transactions, and to implement new systems and processes to manage the paperwork more efficiently. These costs were ultimately passed on to investors in the form of higher fees and commissions. Perhaps most importantly, the paperwork crisis also had a negative impact on the reputation of the financial industry. Investors and the general public became increasingly concerned about the reliability and stability of the financial system, which undermined confidence in the industry as a whole. Responses to the paperwork crisis. The paperwork crisis prompted a number of responses from the financial industry and regulatory bodies. One of the most significant responses was the development of new standards and guidelines aimed at improving the quality and accuracy of financial data. For example, in 1975, the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, established a new rule, known as Rule 17a-3, which required broker-dealers to create and maintain certain records relating to securities transactions. This rule was designed to improve the accuracy and completeness of financial data, and to make it easier for regulatory bodies to monitor and enforce compliance with securities laws. In addition, the paperwork crisis also led to the development of new systems and processes aimed at streamlining the paperwork associated with securities transactions. For example, firms began to use new technologies, such as computers and electronic data interchange, EDI, to automate the processing of paperwork. Furthermore, the paperwork crisis also led to increased cooperation and coordination among intermediaries in the securities industry. For example, the Depository Trust Company, DTC, was created in 1973 to centralize and standardize the processing of securities transactions. The DTC provides a central depository for securities, eliminating the need for physical certificates and reducing the risk of errors and delays in the processing of securities transactions. Lessons learned from the paperwork crisis. The paperwork crisis provided a number of important lessons for the financial industry. One of the most important lessons was the need for coordination and standardization in the processing of financial data. As the volume of securities transactions grew, it became clear that a lack of coordination and standardization in the processing of paperwork could lead to significant problems for the industry and its participants. Another important lesson from the paperwork crisis was the need for transparency in the financial industry. The crisis highlighted the importance of accurate and timely financial data, and the need for investors and regulatory bodies to have access to this data in order to monitor and enforce compliance with securities laws. The paperwork crisis also highlighted the need for the financial industry to embrace new technologies and systems to improve the efficiency and accuracy of the processing of securities transactions. This led to the development of new technologies, such as computers and EDI, which have since become an integral part of the financial industry. Conclusion. The paperwork crisis of the 1970s had a significant impact on the financial industry, leading to increased costs, risks, and concerns about the reliability and stability of the financial system. However, the crisis also prompted important changes in the industry, including the development of new standards and guidelines, the implementation of new technologies and systems, and increased cooperation and coordination among intermediaries. The lessons learned from the paperwork crisis continue to be relevant today, as the financial industry faces new challenges and opportunities. The need for coordination and standardization in the processing of financial data remains important, as does the need for transparency and the embrace of new technologies to improve the efficiency and accuracy of financial transactions. Ultimately, the paperwork crisis serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilance and responsiveness in the financial industry, as well as the need for ongoing collaboration and cooperation among all stakeholders in the financial system. As the financial industry continues to evolve and adapt to changing market conditions, it is essential that the lessons learned from the paperwork crisis are not forgotten. In order to maintain the stability and integrity of the financial system, industry participants must remain vigilant and proactive in addressing emerging risks and challenges. One of the key takeaways from the paperwork crisis is the importance of anticipating and preparing for potential risks and challenges. By being proactive and implementing appropriate risk management strategies, financial institutions can help to mitigate the impact of unforeseen events and disruptions. Another important lesson from the paperwork crisis is the importance of effective communication and collaboration among industry participants. By working together to develop and implement industry-wide standards and guidelines, financial institutions can help to ensure that the processing of securities transactions is efficient, accurate, and transparent. Finally, the paperwork crisis underscores the need for ongoing innovation and adaptation in the financial industry. As new technologies and market trends emerge, financial institutions must be willing to embrace change and adapt their business models accordingly in order to remain competitive and meet the evolving needs of their customers. In conclusion, the paperwork crisis of the 1970s was a defining moment in the history of the financial industry, highlighting the importance of coordination, transparency, and innovation in the processing of securities transactions. While the crisis had a significant impact on the industry at the time, it also prompted important changes and improvements that continue to shape the industry today. As the financial industry continues to evolve and adapt, it is essential that the lessons learned from the paperwork crisis are not forgotten. By remaining vigilant and proactive in addressing emerging risks and challenges, and by working together to develop and implement industry-wide standards and guidelines, financial institutions can help to ensure the stability and integrity of the financial system for years to come.